All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the TD Drives podcast. After a very long, extended vacation, we are back. I am still your host, still dealing with his flu game today, Hayes Kajani. And joining me, I should just call him my co host now. Aaron Jackson is back, baby.
How you
Aaron,
doing, Case? Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for having me once again. Sorry you're feeling down with the sickness. I know a lot of people right now have been sick with the time of the year. I had to deal with some stuff last week, but I'm feeling better now, thankfully, and looking forward to talking about some. Well, I should say looking forward to talking about some games and one that I was very frustrating, but we're going to talk about it and then some other stuff this week for sure. A lot going on for sure.
Oh, we'll get to the 49ers season from hell. We we won't talk about we'll save the walking infirmary for a little bit, but no, it's been a crazy few weeks in the NFL. Apologies to all of our listeners who haven't seen me or you or us for a few weeks. We've had a few scheduling issues. I've had to work a ton and go to school. Aaron has his things, but well, I'm gonna try and keep it to more once a week now because now my schedule is a little bit more consistent. So I appreciate all of our listeners for just being patient, just staying with us, and hopefully we'll get things back to more consistency as the final few weeks of the regular season kick off. Speaking, and we get closer to the postseason. But let's kick it off with some of these games. Let's start with the Thanksgiving night morning game between the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions. The Bears, probably the biggest coaching debacle I have ever seen of a football game, saves the Lions to their 10th consecutive win and a franchise best 11-1 start. This coaching debacle ultimately cost head coach Matt Eberflus his job. He was fired on Thursday. Interim coach Thomas Brown, who was taking over for the previously fired offensive coordinator Shane Waldron, will be the interim head coach for the rest of the season. Aaron, have you ever seen a bigger coaching debacle than the Chicago Bears? How they botched that game trying to tie the game up late.
That has to be the worst clock management I've ever seen in any professional sports game in history at any level. It was so bad. I mean, Williams gets brought down with like 31 seconds on the clock, and I can understand like, sorry, apologies again, still dealing with a little bit of a frog in my throat. But yeah, he gets brought down like 31 seconds. And I can understand, when they go to line up, if you're like, you're Eberflus and you're like, okay, I'm going to let Williams call the timeout when he wants, if he wants to call it, or they're going to run the play. But after 10 seconds goes by or like 12 seconds goes by and there's like 19 seconds on the clock and you see that like there's no intention of like, it looks like there's no intention of him like snapping the ball, call a timeout. Like you still have a chance to run a play, like running out to like the sideline and kick a deep field goal. I mean, they were literally in field goal range. I think they got down to like the 25-yard line, and then Williams was brought down the backfield, and then the time just ran out. It was one of the worst. Um, Poor performances of clock management that I've ever seen. And it was a shame because, I think Caleb has gotten, I don't want to say he's gotten a bad rap because he certainly has had some performances that have been very lackluster. But I thought in this game he was for the most part fine. He made some errant throws for sure, but for a rookie quarterback and what he's been able to do this year, I think he's been more than solid for the Bears out there. Keenan Allen had a great game for the Bears. DJ Moore was really solid out there. I think the Bears really never really were able to establish the run in this game. But again, the fact that they hung in there with the best team in the NFC right now and had a chance to win this one in the final moment shows like that they have guys out there and that the Bears are a better team than they've been in previous years. And Caleb's doing a good job, but it's just absolutely poor clock management. And yeah, I mean, Eberflus should have walked off that field. He should have fired himself after that game. And yeah,
He
I
said he
think it's a
handled
good
it
thing that he's
properly.
gone. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I mean, like I said, I think the Bears are going to be fine. Of course, they're not going anywhere this season, but they're in a very tough division, and obviously there's some young quarterbacks in that division too, like Jordan Love. But I think that for the most part, going forward, they'll be fine. Over the next year or two, I think I could see them being a wild card team or a contender. But yeah, just absolutely pitiful display of clock management.
You could not have done any worse than the Chicago Bears did in the final moments of that game than what Matt Eberflus coached up in the final 30 seconds of that game. You're at the 30-yard line. You call a penalty. You get called for I believe it was a false start penalty. So you lose 10 yards, and then you take a sack. Then you don't call a timeout. Then you're forcing Caleb Williams to call up a Hail Mary. And credit Caleb Williams. In that second half, he made some phenomenal throws, 2 touchdown passes to Keenan Allen. The Bears dug themselves out of a 17-point. They were down 23-6 midway through the third quarter, and they dug themselves out of it. They came back. They had a chance to tie the game, and they ultimately do not because of one of the worst coaching debacles I have ever seen in my entire life. Matt
The
Eberflus, you
only
deserve.
thing Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say the only thing I wanted to add is that yeah, there are people on the sideline that were like had their hands on their head, like wanting Caleb to call a timeout. But it's like, look over at your coach. Like he has just as much of ability to call a timeout in that situation and readjust and get a good play call out there. And it's like you can't leave it all like you mentioned up to the quarterback in a moment where he's taking a sack. It's a stressful moment in that game. That's why you're the head coach. You need to be able to be on the sideline and be smart with the play clock.
So now it's just another lost Bears season where they came in with so much expectation with Caleb's collegiate career. You know, he was expected to immediately turn this team around. It started off okay, and then they went on a massive spiral. Here's another great coaching debacle, or should I say a Tyreek Stevenson debacle, with one of the greatest Hail Mary plays I have ever seen to end that game between the Bears and the Commanders. Tyreek Stevenson is literally mocking fans. He's not even on the field for that final Hail Mary play. And Jaden Daniels with one of the most insane bombs I've ever seen, probably since Aaron Rodgers did it against the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, before we get to where the Bears go from here, your reaction to the Hail Mary. What were you thinking when you saw Jaden Daniels pull off the Commander's miracle?
So it was funny. I was actually down in I was actually driving from my friend's house in Sacramento to a pumpkin patch, and I was watching on my phone. I was a couple minutes delayed, and so one of my friends texted me, all kind of semi spoiled. It was like, "Oh my gosh, did you just see that?" And I was like, "No." And then I saw it came up a couple minutes later, and I was in disbelief. I was very shocked by that. Jaden Daniels has had an incredible season out there, and this is a conversation we can certainly have later in the show. I mean, I think he's certainly in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. He may be Rookie of the Year, but there's a certain guy out in Denver we'll be talking about in a little bit that I think is right there in that conversation too. But that was very surprising, and we've really seen ever since that moment. I mean, the Commanders definitely had a good start to the season, but we've seen kind of both franchises kind of go up and down since then. The Bears went on to lose, I think, 5 of their next 6 or 6 of their next 7. Commanders have had a really solid season, and they're still in the wild card. I think towards the top of the wild card in the NFC right now. So you kind of saw both teams kind of shift after that game, and it kind of made you wonder, if that Hail Mary isn't pulled off, where are these two teams standing today? But yeah, I was certainly in shock and awe after I saw that play.
I I'll keep beating that drum. Probably the greatest throw I've seen since Aaron Rodgers, either against the Cardinals or the Lions. Pick one. Pick one. And he did another Hail Mary against Buffalo right at the end of that first half in week 3. Like that was vintage Aaron Rodgers. But the Commanders have had a very solid season. You said they were at the top of they actually hold the final wild card spot in the NFC because it's the 4 division leaders, it's Minnesota, and it's Green Bay. So
Yeah,
they're going to be
it's
three
just
NFC North teams that are going to be heading probably towards the postseason with how great they are. And then the Commanders have had a few really tough losses. They lose to the red hot Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to get to them in a little bit. They need to be talked about with how well they're playing, especially a guy who New York Giants fans are probably very sad to see playing so well. And then they lose a very strange one to the Dallas Cowboys, where they get an 86-yard touchdown to tie the game, miss an extra point, then they give up a punt return then they give up an onside kick recovery for a touchdown, then they can't complete another Hail Mary and lose to the Cowboys. They bounce back by crushing the Titans. Again, they're the Titans. But no, the Commanders have had a great season. Where the Bears go from here, I'm not sure. rumors about Cliff Kingsbury, being the front runner for HC, Ben Johnson of the Lions, the offensive coordinator there. Kingsbury's had a cup of coffee as a head coach in the NFL, with Arizona and Kyler. He's been all right as a head coach. He took him to the playoffs once. He's had mediocre seasons as a head coach, but you know, for the Bears, it's just another disappointing disaster for them. They've been in the doldrums for quite a they've been in the doldrum for quite a while, and you just hope that Caleb can get some night. Roma Dunze takes another step next year. They find a few more pieces on that defense, and they bounce back in a big way next year. But speaking of the NFC North, let's get to one of the last Thanksgiving Day game because I'm sure no one wants to talk about Drew Lock versus Cooper Rush. But we'll get to the red hot Green Bay Packers, who have won 7 of their last 8 games after drubbing the Miami Dolphins 30-17. How much of a force can these young Packers be in the NFC, even though they're going to be probably playing the playoffs on the road?
Yeah, I mean they could certainly, I think, win a game out there. I think that right now I think their ceiling is probably an NFC title game, and that might be even being a little bit kind out there. I just think that the Lions are too good. That they're just, I think, a step above everybody in the NFC right now. I would say even above Philadelphia. But I think that Green Bay is probably behind those two teams right now. I know that the Vikings are technically, I think, still ahead of them, but I think just from what I've seen recently, I would put Green Bay a little bit ahead of them in that race. But the NFC is just so top heavy this year that I think that Green Bay is going to have a hard time getting past the second round. I mean, they could make it to the NFC title game, but I just think Philadelphia or Detroit's a little bit too good. But yeah, Jordan Love's been certainly impressive this season. Defensively, they feel much improved out there too. Yeah, the Packers are a team that I definitely like going forward. That division is just going to be a bloodbath these next 4 or 5 years or so.
Think the best thing they could have ever done, again, making Giants fans even worse, is signing Xavier McKinney away from the Giants, tying the league lead in interceptions, and then going and grabbing Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs has been really, really impressive as a running back for the Green Bay Packers, and then Love getting it going at the right time of the year. No picks his last 2 games, 5 touchdowns, and the Packers have dominated their opponents. The Packers were bottom 10 in the league in defense last year. They are top 10 this year. Jeff Hadley has done a terrific job. Of course, bringing in a guy like McKinney fixes basically their back end. And then you still have the guys up front like Preston Smith and Kenny Clark and Luke Van Ness, who's taken a nice step forward. And other guys who have Quay Walker still there at linebacker. He's really good. But no, they could probably beat, Atlanta, who's in the NFC South lead right now, but are they really anybody's fearing them? Likely not. I mean, could they beat Philadelphia? Maybe. They played a close one with them, but that was week 1 of the season. These two teams look drastically different. I mean, they probably could beat the Seahawks with the inconsistent way they play, particularly on offense. I mean, everybody but Detroit they can probably beat. Got to give a lot of respect and love to the Lions. 11-1, 10 straight wins. The fact that Dan Campbell has this, he's got them glued in their ears, and every position they have, they're at least 2 deep. Offensive lineman, linebacker, corner, receivers. Of course, Sonic and Knuckles at running back with Gibbs and Montgomery. I love that Sonic and Knuckles as a Sonic fan. Sam Laporta at tight end. Goff is playing extremely well. I think, is this the Lions' year to make the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, again, the only other team I think that's right there is the Eagles, and while Saquon's played really well, I mean, watching the Eagles in some games, there's been multiple games I feel like, hey, this is a game I feel like they should win by a lot more than they have. In many ways, they kind of relate to the Chiefs in that respect. The Chiefs are, they're going to be just fine, but the Chiefs are actually worse in terms of the regular season, in terms of how mediocre they've looked in some of their wins. But no, yeah, I mean, the Lions right now to me look like the clear front runner in the NFC, and man, what a great story that would be for Detroit, knowing just the heartache and the frustration they've gone through with that franchise for decades. And it would be really cool to see this team make their first Super Bowl. And again, you mentioned Jared Goff. Um, been super efficient this season. He's up to I think nearly 3,000 passing yards. He had a really solid game the last time the Packers and the Lions faced off last month, and I believe he only had 4 incompletions in that game. I'm a Cal fan, so I have to root for my Cowboy too. And you mentioned, of course, Montgomery and Gibbs, and that's one thing that's important too. Is for a lot of teams to have one running back that can probably get you a guaranteed touchdown every game is a blessing to have. To have two of them is even better. And yeah, I mean Montgomery or Gibbs could certainly be a clear starter on a lot of other teams in the league. So yeah, Detroit's a fun team. They've got some really good guys out wide, of course, led by Amon Ra. I've been really impressed with how Khalif Raymond has kind of come into the mix. Sam Laporta, of course, has emerged as arguably a top 6 tight end, I'd say, in the league. Yeah, they have really all the pieces right now to do it. Of course, a fantastic head coach in Campbell. I love the Lions, man. They're definitely a team that I'm going to be paying more close attention to going forward now that the Niners are out.
You can say you're a Cal guy, but I may be a 49ers fan, but I am a Michigan boy. I was born in the 313. It's awesome for me, coming who was born in Michigan, who when I was first came to California, I was 4. That was the last championship the Pistons that was the last championship Detroit had seen in '04. That summer we left California. That was the last championship the Pistons have had the city of Detroit has had in my lifetime. So to see the Lions maybe go out and win their first ever. This is the only team in the NFC that has never made the Super Bowl. The Detroit Lions have never made the Super Bowl. And that's insane, with how much of a history they have with guys like Barry Sanders and Megatron and Matt Stafford, you know, all elite Hall of Fame players, but they could quite even sniff the conference championship. And now they should win the Super Bowl. I think anything less than a Super Bowl for the Lions this year is a failure because they look so dominant. They are too deep at basically every position. They're so well coached. They have incredible chemistry. Goff is playing probably the best football of his career. St. Brown has emerged into a top 10 receiver. Gibbs and Montgomery are probably the best running back duo in the league. The defense is playing outstanding right now. Now led with even without Aiden Hutchinson, this defense is still a top 5 unit in the league. So I think anything less than a Super Bowl this year is a failure. And that state of Michigan is going to party if the Lions bring home that Lombardi. I think Detroit's going to be shut down probably for a week if that happens. There will be people like how the Cavs wanted a championship in 2016. There will be people literally crying in the streets if the Lions bring home that Lombardi. I'm just
Yeah,
really
it would be a great story, like you mentioned too. Plus, you had, and of course, well, it's not in Detroit. It's just a little bit away. You had the University of Michigan winning the college football national championship
blue.
last year. Having the Lions go out and win it the year after here there too would be great for the state. I definitely, they're probably my rooting interest right now is to see the Lions go all the way. I would say that I think if they make a Super Bowl, I think that that would be a good step. I mean, obviously, winning it, they look like the best team in the league right now. But I think the important thing right now this year is at least making the Super Bowl, and I think that they have all the talent, as you just mentioned, to do that.
I think they should. I think I don't really see any reason why they couldn't. I actually think they will, and I think people are going to realize how good of it. Give a lot of credit to Dan Campbell. He's an elite coach, but Brad Holmes, the GM of the Detroit Lions, every move, every signing, every draft pick, he was questioned and scrutinized why he took Jahmyr Gibbs with the 12th pick. Look at how good Jahmyr Gibbs has been this year for the Lions. Drafting a guy like St. Brown. People thought that Jared Goff, when he was first traded to Detroit, he was just going to be a bridge quarterback and they were just going to draft a guy because they were going to be so bad. Now Goff has taken his game to another level and he's the guy now in Detroit. So give all the credit. It's a testament to how great their front office is, how great of a culture they've built, how incredible of a coach Dan Campbell is to get these guys to believe and buy in. It's a true testament to organization, players, and coach all being in sync together. And it's created something incredibly beautiful for the Lions and especially for the state of Michigan. And the Packers.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, and another guy that I want to give some credit to is their offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who has been phenomenal
Oh,
for them this year.
Stanley.
He makes Kyle Shanahan look like an idiot. I mean, I'm sorry, he
It's
does.
true.
Like his play calling. I'll say this right now. Like I'm just going to say it. Like if the Niners fired Kyle Shanahan, call up Ben Johnson, have him come on over because man, I love this guy. What he's done. Super creative play caller out there. Really throws. He always has like one or two plays a game they just feel like that you've never seen before, and they come out there and they execute them so well. And he's just a brilliant mind out there. So yeah, Campbell's a great coach, but he has an incredible staff around him too.
Aaron Glenn as a defensive coordinator too. He has made this Lions unit one of the
100%.
stingiest to try and stop a guy like Kirby Joseph, who he's going to be getting it. He's going to be getting paid very soon because this guy. I still have to read the stat again, but Kirby Joseph has more interceptions than yards allowed. He has 8 interceptions and has a 0 rating when targeted. That's insane. Like that's
Yeah.
like Hall of Fame level play from this guy who was a late round pick for the Detroit Lions. Like this, how much this staff has invested into the culture, how much these players buy in and believe in this coach and this staff and this team. They should go all the way. They should win a Super Bowl. They should win multiple Super Bowls before the roster gets too expensive because if these guys can all continue to play the way they're playing, it's going to be very difficult for them to keep all these guys. And then we'll see the bust ups eventually. But Lions, Packers, Vikings. I mean, 3 teams, all with 10 wins, all going to the postseason probably. I mean, they have the Vikings and Packers haven't locked in yet, but they probably will in at least the next 1 to 2 games or so. That's probably one of the greatest division races we've ever seen. And the Lions and Packers play tonight. This is a big one for the North because if the Lions lose, they fall into a tie with Minnesota for the division lead, and then the Packers are only a game behind. If the Lions win, then the Packers are likely out of it, and then the Lions only have to face the Vikings one more time and then probably lock the division up for good. But this is what insane North. These are 3 very talented teams. We'll get to the Vikings in a little bit because they had a great win against the Cardinals. But let's move to the Black Friday game, and you just mentioned it. The most mediocre 11-1 team you have ever seen, and probably one of the worst quarterback things I've ever seen since Dan Orlovsky ran out of the end zone in 2008. Let's set the scene for you. The Raiders are down 3. Aiden O'Connell, I mean, they're going to line up and snap the ball. There's under 10 seconds to go, and Aiden O'Connell's not even looking at the football. They call it an illegal backwards pass that was recovered by the Chiefs, and the Raiders lose by 3. The Chiefs improved to 11-1 after a tough loss to the Bills. They are still the number 1 team in the AFC. Is this one of the worst quarterback? Like, who do you blame for that? Is it the center? Is it the coach? Is it the quarterback? Like, is it the Raid? This is really a Raiders season from hell all over
What
again.
what it is it's the Las Vegas Raiders being the Las Vegas Raiders. The
That's
Raiders,
fair.
even in their time in Oakland, they will always find a new creative way to lose a football game. It always seems to happen, whether it's a missed field goal, whether it's a botched snap, whatever it is, they always seem to find a way to lose a game. The Chiefs have had so many wins this year that they weren't even necessarily wins. It's because the other team lost the game in the final minutes of the game. It's like the Chiefs are doing side quests this year in ways to still get wins before they get to the postseason. And look, and I said it earlier, like I hope, and we're going to get into Buffalo too. I hope Buffalo passes them up to where the Chiefs are forced to play in the first round because then they would probably line up with Denver. And Denver, who I mean, the way Knicks is playing, they could maybe pull off that upset. But then again, like it's so hard to count out against the Chiefs because when it hits the postseason, they turn into a whole different behemoth. But like, I don't. It's just like Mahomes. Well, he's still putting up decent numbers. He hasn't looked impressive watching the games this season. They have not had a solid run game at all. Pacheco's been off and on hurt, and when he's played, he hasn't looked incredible. Kareem Hunt has had some games where he's looked like a solid red zone back, but outside of that, he's not really like the guy he used to be. I mean, getting D-Hop was a major thing for them. They helped improve them. Travis Kelce has started to come into his own a little bit, so there definitely are some positive things out there. Xavier Worthy's looked good for the first half of the season, but it's just something about the Chiefs. It's just there's a lack of execution there. There's something that with them that they just don't have the same kind of vibe or firepower that they have in previous years. But yeah, I mean, for the Raiders, for them, there's a few things offensively. Brock Bowers has been an absolute beast, and it's a shame that he's on the Raiders because if he's putting up these numbers on a playoff team, I mean, even though the rookie of the year is always going to go to a quarterback, he'd be in the conversation. I mean, he's had an incredible rookie season for the Raiders. But they've had a lot of problems with their run game this year. Zamir White has been hurt, and even when he was in, he didn't look great. Amir Abdul is not a starting running back, and the Raiders have a long way to go, I think, before we see them actually as a franchise that might be a playoff team again. I really thought that Pierce as a head coach was going to do some wonders for that team, but it just has not been the case this year. They have not had a solid starting quarterback. I'm glad O'Connell's starting to get some time because I think he's a guy you can invest in going forward, despite the horrible end of the game. But yeah, it's just. I don't know, man. The Chiefs just do not seem like a team that is going to make it all the way this year.
Yet, with all the problems they have on offense, the defense has been great, but I mean, this was a bad game for the defense. Even they're still 11-1. They're still the back-to-back champs. They blocked a field goal to beat Denver. They survived Bryce Young, and I want to end the show by giving Bryce Young a ton of love with how well he's been playing as of late. But it's Mahomes. I told you this before. I mean, I've mentioned this before to you on other shows. Mahomes, Kelce, Andy Reid, Spags. As long as they're together, they always have a shot. Especially number 15. He's basically Tom Brady. This guy continues to win, 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 and win. And they may have lost to Buffalo, but he knows how to get Josh Allen in the playoffs. He's done it last, 2-3 years running. He's beaten Josh Allen in the postseason. He beats Lamar. He beats all these other guys. He goes to the Super Bowl. He wins Super Bowls. It's just the Mahomes magic. It's a testament to Mahomes and how good and how special of a legendary, not just a quarterback, but of an athlete he is in the modern era. He's this modern era's Tom Brady. He really is. Can't say
Yeah,
anything else other than that.
the Mahomes magic, and then they've somehow they get a new Ouija board every game where they move some stuff around and somehow manage to pull off some dark magic themselves to be able to win football games. But again, it takes a team with a lot of talent to be able to still come away with a win. It's very hard to win in the National Football League, and I don't think that gets talked about enough. So I mean, still, despite the fact that the Raiders, the Panthers are some teams that aren't top teams in the league, they obviously still have talented guys on both sides of the football, and the fact that Chiefs are doing enough to win those games shows that they're still a team that can be reckoned with for sure. I mean, they're a team that you never want to count out, like I said, but it's going to be interesting come playoff time, and I'm really intrigued to see how the seedings go these last few weeks of the season because I think I have a feeling that there could be an upset of brewing in the first round.
I agree. I think there's going to be a ton of upsets with how talented and loaded the AFC is. I mean, there's a lot of great teams in this in the bottom half with teams like the Chargers and the Broncos who are playing well. I mean, if I had to pick one of these two, because the Chargers, I mean, despite a poor offensive day from Herbert, they get 4 interceptions on Kirk Cousins. They win 17-13. And a guy you have been bashing for quite a while in Bo Nix, 4 touchdowns. 4 touchdowns in the win over Cleveland. I mean, this guy has been playing incredible as of late. Chargers Broncos, who do you think could pull off an upset?
To be fair, like you mentioned early on, it's been a few weeks since we've done a podcast. I am officially a believer now. All right, I've come around. I've realized my wrongs, and I apologize to the Bo Nix people out there, the Bo Nix fans, you're right. He is better than Tim Tebow. I will go ahead and apologize for making that comparison earlier in the season. In terms of who I think has a better chance, I really think Denver because their defense. I mean, Chargers have a good defense too, but the Denver, I believe that Denver has a better defense. And despite allowing a lot of points against the Browns, we've seen Jameis Winston make an incredible turnaround for Cleveland these last few weeks. I think that the Broncos really have potential on winning a playoff game this year. They're one of the most improved teams out there, and I'm not saying Sean Payton's going to win Coach of the Year or anything like that, but I've been really impressed with how he's been able to turn that team around. And yeah, Nix is the guy for the future for them for sure. So I would say who I believe has a chance of making a deeper run. That's a tough one. I think that both of these teams can certainly win their first round matchups. Right now, I'm projecting the Broncos maybe being a 7, the Chargers maybe being a 6, meaning that we will either have Broncos Bills or Broncos Chiefs. I think the Broncos could beat the Chiefs. I don't think they could beat the Bills. The Chargers right now, correct me if I'm wrong, would face the Steelers. I believe that's the way
I
things are
believe
lined
it's
up.
this. I believe it would be the Texans because the Steelers have a better record than the Texans.
Got you.
So it
Okay,
would be the
so
Texans.
got you. Okay, so then in that case, if it's the Texans have had a major drop off recently. I think the Chargers could beat them. I think we could definitely see the Chargers and the Broncos in the second round. I just think that right now Buffalo, in my opinion, is the clear best team in the AFC. But you never want to count out Kansas City when it comes to playoff time either.
Do you ever want to count out Baltimore now with the way that Henry can still continue to get off those runs? But right now the Steelers have that division. And speaking, I mean Russell Wilson throwing for what 400 yards and 3 TDs in the 40-point explosion over the Bengals, probably to end their season. Can the Steelers make any noise in this conversation with the
Oh,
way Russ has been playing? Because
Oh,
he's
for
been
sure.
phenomenal.
And I'll say this right now. Look, I've always thought, and again, they lost to the Browns in a game that was a super winnable game. But outside of that, I got to give credit to Mike Tomlin. I've always thought that the fact that he's able to pull some of these Steelers teams that on paper do not look impressive at all and still have over 500 records, and for as long as he's done it, shows how good of a coach that he is. And also, I mean, I honestly think right now Mike Tomlin is in conversation for Coach of the Year. I really do, and I think that the Steelers can certainly make a run. Um, Russell Wilson has had a career resurgence. He basically is trying to convince people that use the Men in Black one and make people forget about that year, those 2 years in Denver, and that Seattle's what he's been all along. But no, I think that the Steelers are going to probably win a playoff game as well. I think they're a team that can certainly make it into the second round, into the divisional round. Whatever happens from there, I think it really just comes down to matchups. I also believe that the Steelers' ceiling is the AFC Championship game. Again, I just think Buffalo is too good. But if the Steelers can make it to an AFC Championship game with this roster, I think that a lot of Pittsburgh fans would be happy about that.
19 consecutive years that Mike Tomlin has not had a losing record.
Incredible.
It's one of the most unbelievable runs in sports you'll ever see because this guy, with some of the worst quarterback play other than the New York Jets, continues to deliver double-digit win seasons. Basically every year, you basically can count the Steelers in as a guaranteed playoff team. And Russell Wilson looks like Seattle Seahawks Russell Wilson that was terrorizing me for years as a 49ers fan with how great he is. And I despise the Seahawks with every bone in my body, but damn it, I love Russell Wilson. He's some of the throws he makes are fantastic. He's just a great guy all the way around. And I mean, you're talking about, can the Broncos and Chargers, upset one of those teams? I mean, losing J.K. Dobbins for 4 to 6 weeks with that knee injury is going to be a very significant loss because the offense really has not come around all that much for the Chargers. They haven't scored 30 points in a game all season, but that defense, it's a top 5 unit in the league, and this was a Chargers team that was bashed for me having some of the
Well,
worst defenses.
The
the last few
only
years.
I think they did it once, and it was to one of the worst defenses in the league in Cincinnati. I think they scored 30. That was the only game all season they did. And that's another team, man. Like, because we're talking about right now the AFC North and how good that Baltimore is with King Henry, and we're talking about how good the Steelers are. Man, the Bengals, if they had a halfway competent defense, man, this is a team that would be right in the mix right there too, because Joe Burrow has put up some of the best numbers in the league. And it's such a shame the fact that this team is going to miss the playoffs with all the talent they have on offense because of the fact that they are a bottom five, maybe even bottom three defense in the NFL. What a shame of a season it has been for Cincinnati, man.
I read an article that said it best. The 49ers and the Bengals have basically had the exact same season, except the 49ers can add injury to insult. Literally add
And
injury
those
to
were the teams I
insult.
picked to make it to the Super Bowl before the season started. And look where they are now.
Eh, well, you know, it's a rough year for the Bengals, but I love Joe Burrow. I hope he comes back next year. Let's speak a little bit more like on the and then speak a little bit more for the Broncos. Pat Surtain, Nick Bonito, these guys have been producing so much on that defense. If they continue to get the production of Bo Nix has had over these last couple of games, and get the defense that has been a top 10 unit all year, they could definitely pull off an upset with how poorly the Texans have played over the last few weeks. They'll win their division because the AFC South is horrible, but the way the way the Broncos have been playing, they've been playing fantastic. I think they could definitely make the conference championship game. And it's just a happy marriage between Sean Payton and Bo Nix because I just don't think Russell Wilson's game meshed with Sean Payton's schemes, whereas Bo Nix's game fits perfectly under Sean Payton. So I think it's just, you know, get two guys who needed different environments to succeed because Russ is balling right now in Pittsburgh and Bo Nix is balling right now in Denver.
And I think it's important to note too how important Bo Nix is and how important a competent quarterback is for that offensive system they have under Sean Payton. And of course, he's only been coached there now. I believe this is just his third year. But let me just read off some of the names of because I have some from friends who are Broncos fans, and I felt their pain the last few years, and I'm happy to see them starting to do well. Let me just read off some names of quarterbacks that they've had ever since Peyton Manning and they won the Super Bowl last. Trevor Simeon, who wasn't horrible, but he certainly wasn't great. Paxton Lynch, Brock Osweiler, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Brandon Allen, who of course is the Niners' backup now, Brett Rippey and Drew Lock, Jeff Driscoll. I mean, they have had some horrible quarterbacks that have come through their system, and the fact that they finally have one that fits it so well is such a welcome sign for Denver.
It really is. And I want to get to the other side of the Chargers game against the Falcons because we could talk about the AFC, and we're going to talk about the top of the AFC in just a second with the next section. But I want to speak to where the NFC South is right now because Kirk Cousins has looked garbage these last few games. 4 interceptions in that loss to the Chargers, including a pick six. Tampa Bay gets Mike Evans back, and this team they're now tied in the standings. Like, but they had to luck out on a Chuba Hubbard fumble that forced a game-winning field goal in overtime with the Carolina Panthers, who have been playing great. Mad respect to Carolina for how well Bryce Young for how well he's been playing, but who wins that division and how much are they even relevant in the NFC's conversation at
Well,
all? Either of these
and
teams.
that's the thing to me. It's like, does it even matter? Because whoever wins this division between likely Atlanta or Tampa is going to get absolutely mud stomped at home against Green Bay or Minnesota in the wild card round. Like, I just don't think there's any chance that either of those teams will make it past the first round of the playoffs. I mean,
Baker
if I had
Mayfield
to
continue to make one arm passes, then they can win. But other than
Yeah,
that, no.
exactly. Or if they can keep scheduling games for Kirk on prime time on Sunday nights or Monday nights, maybe they'll have a chance too. I think they face the Raiders in a couple of weeks. That'll help them. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I had to pick right now, I would probably say the Falcons just because the injuries that Tampa Bay has suffered with Evans and Godwin have been very noticeable out there. Cade Otton is definitely coming to his own. He's been a very fantastic tight end the last 5, 6 games for them. But outside of that, like they just don't have anything out there, and the Bucks have definitely gone downhill. I would probably pick Atlanta to win this division, but again, they're going to win the division at 9-8, 10-7 at best, and get stomped in.
And they have no defense. They're last in the league
No,
in
not
they're
at all.
last in the league in sacks, and they're bottom 10 in the league against the pass overall. And they're bottom 10 in the league against the pass overall. And in Tampa Bay, they let a young, very scrappy, but they should be beating them by more Panthers team hang around. And if Chuba Hubbard doesn't fumble the ball at the 30-yard line, they probably lose in overtime to Carolina, who I want to give a ton of credit to Bryce Young for ever since he came off his benching. He's been fantastic. I mean, the Carolina Panthers, you're saying that Bo Nix has been found, they found a quarterback in Denver. The Carolina Panthers may have found a quarterback in the number one overall pick again.
I think that if they had a competent running back, I mean, Hubbard hasn't been horrible, but I mean, he also is not. I mean, he's not a starting quarterback. He's a backup running back. He's not a starting running back. He's a backup running back. If they had a competent starting running back out there, they could be a playoff team 100%. They'd be right in this conversation. And they're still kind of on the outside looking in, but I don't think that they're going to get the job done. I think that they're still probably a year away from being a contender in this division. But if they had a running back, they'd be right there, man.
I know that they're probably not going to make it. I just wanted to show a lot of love to
Oh,
Bryce and
100%.
how
Bryce Young deserves it for sure. No, I mean, it's hard to say that there's a guy who's a most improved player after, only one season in the league, but he looks like one of the most improved players. He did not look like he had a good rookie year. A lot of people were already counting him out after the rookie year, and he's come back and he's been really solid.
I mean, he got benched and people were saying, is his career over
Yeah,
for a number
exactly.
one pick? And now he looks like a guy who can probably take this. They need a couple extra receivers down in Carolina, but they need they need a lot in Carolina, but banged up. They started poorly, and then Tampa Bay and Atlanta, will just probably write them off in the wild card races. But there are going to be some fun races up and down the AFC and the NFC. Let's get to the back to the top of the AFC because the Baltimore Ravens lose a game to the red hot, probably the Lions' biggest challenger, the Philadelphia Eagles. Saquon Barkley has been on an absolute tear for the Philadelphia Eagles. Philly has won 8 in a row. This is the second hottest team in the league other than the Lions. Can Philly be that challenger for the Lions to dethrone them?
I would say so. The only thing I would say about Philadelphia is that, of course, the win against the Ravens impressive, but they've had a lot of games this year where they've looked like they've struggled, and it's kind of been a little bit, like a little bit of an eye opener. Like, I wonder what's up with them. When they beat the Browns, that was back before Jameis Winston was starting for them, and they only won that game by 4. They struggled in that one. They struggled at home against Jacksonville. But they have been playing a lot better ever since, too. They dominated Dallas. They dominated the Rams on Sunday Night Football. And then, of course, got that win over the Ravens. And, you talked about it. Saquon Barkley, man, this guy has been he's been going off. He had was it 255 yards against LA. He had a really solid game last week too. The problem is, I just think the Rams are such a solid team all around. I think they're just edged them out a little bit more. I don't think Jalen Hurts has quite had the season he had a couple years ago, too. I would probably favor the Lions, but I certainly could see those two teams in an NFC Championship game.
I think the way they win that game is probably, running the football and controlling the clock because
Yep.
the ways they have started very slowly in a lot of games and they just kind of turn it on in the second half.
Yeah,
You
I think
cannot.
that I want to say that either as of 2 weeks ago, it might still be the case that I think that they have the least amount of points scored in the first quarter out of any team this year. Because I want to say, as of that Cowboys game a few weeks back, I think they had only combined for like 3 or 6 points in the first quarter all year.
It's you cannot start slowly against the Detroit Lions. If you start slowly against the Lions, they will bury you early, and then you will be forced to throw footballs, and they will most likely have interceptions off of those thrown footballs because you go away from Saquon Barkley and how good he is. But credit to Philly, they started 2-2. I mean, the sky was falling after that start, and they've ripped off an incredible winning streak. The defense has been playing much, much better ever since a guy like Zach Bond came back. Jalen Carter's been great. Jordan Davis has been great. No, they lose Fletcher Cox for the rest of the year to the same injury his former teammate Javon Hargrave suffered with the Niners. So tough loss for them. I mean, he will be missed. But, Hurts, Barkley, Goddard, Fangio, and the questionable coaching of Sirianni, I don't know if they can beat the Lions, but they're going to certainly give them a challenge. And on the other side, another disappointing loss for the Ravens. This is a team that should be right there with the Chiefs and Bills, and instead at the top of the AFC, and instead they just have these letdown game after letdown game after letdown game. So, I just can't trust the Ravens with how many games they just give away, or they don't. I mean, Justin Tucker's missing field goals. This is one of the best kickers of all time. He can't hit a field goal anymore.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing I wanted to talk about when it came to the Ravens is I wanted to read up a couple stats here from Sportico. So this was earlier this season. Through the first 5 weeks, NFL kickers were making more field goals than ever, hitting them an 80%, 86% accuracy, which was a record. From 39 yards or fewer, they had made 98%. And then kickers were on pace to make 251 field goals from 50 plus yards this season, which would shatter the record of 158. Justin Tucker has been one of the top kickers in the NFL the last decade. While everybody else has been going up, he has fallen off of a complete cliff. He is missing field goals left and right every single week out there. He looks absolutely washed. And honestly, I've gotten to the point where I think that the Ravens should draft a field goal kicker next year. That's how bad things have gotten. I think that they need to consider replacing Justin Tucker because he has really lost them some games this year. He has. And the thing is, like, as you said, the Ravens are still right in there. They have one of the easiest remaining schedules left. They play New York. They play Cleveland. They play Houston, which will certainly be a tougher game on Christmas. I think the big game is going to be next week when they host Pittsburgh because they're still in the race to win that division, and that's going to be one that'll probably could potentially decide that the story there. But yeah, Justin Tucker has been a liability out there on the field for him, and there's a couple other field goal kickers in the league that we could talk about too with that. But yeah, Justin Tucker certainly has been the glaring what is going on kind of out there in the league this year.
Hey, Dravens, you want Jake Moody? You can have Jake Moody. You can have a field goal kicker because the Niners are done with him. At least Niner fans are done with him.
See, that's the thing. Like, and we're gonna get and talk about the Niners, but like, who's worse? They're both like right there.
Yeah, well, let's just rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, let's
I
do
think
it.
we've waited long enough.
Yeah.
After a humiliating loss where Brock Purdy didn't play in Green Bay, where they lose 38-10 to the Packers, they followed up with an even worse showing, losing 35-10 to the Bills. Josh Allen is literally catching passes for touchdowns. Yes, he was credited for receiving and passing touchdown on the same possession. Curse you. I mean, don't curse you because you've been playing outstanding, but the season from hell got even worse when Christian McCaffrey left the game in the second quarter with a PCL injury. He is out for the rest of the year. Jordan Mason now on IR. I mean, this is really 2020 all over again, but it might be even worse considering the expectations they had.
Yeah, and look, my biggest frustration is before Christian McCaffrey got healthy after the bye, right? Jordan Mason and Isaac Guerrero were playing fantastic football out there, okay? So, what has been your biggest issue with injuries? Overplaying guys or having them out there on the field too long and running them absolutely rampant to where they running them until they're in the hospital. Okay, you've got three backs. You're supposed to be an elite play caller in the league, Mr. Shanahan. You're supposed to be one of the top offensive play callers. Why are you not running multiple running backs each play and having different schemes out there for different teams with guys who all can pick up 10 yards a carry? Why are you not doing that? Why are you running Christian McCaffrey into the ground the same way you did last year when you probably had him come back before he was at full health anyways? Then you have him go out there and run the ball 15, 20 times a game again when you don't need to do that and you have other running backs who are more than capable. You've been a running back factory for the last decade. I don't understand why what the need was to continue running Christian McCaffrey into the ground. And then once he's hurt, your next option is, well, I guess we'll run Jordan Mason into the ground. And they did that. They ran him into the ground under the snow, and now he's going to be gone for a while too. It's been an absolute piss poor mismanagement of personnel on the field. There have been some injuries that certainly have not been, that have just been, things that have happened out there. Obviously, we saw that earlier this year with Brandon Ayuk. Even before that, though, he wasn't having a good season. I think it's been a combination of a lot of things for the San Francisco 49ers. I think it's been horrible mismanagement of personnel with coaching. I think it's been just some injuries out of their control. I don't know what's up with their training staff, but every year it seems like even when we do have health, we still have guys that are injured. It's been just players that have not been that have been completely underperforming. I mean, the team on paper is a team that should be a Super Bowl team. And, now we're talking about them probably already being out of the conversation of the playoffs. Brock Purdy, I want to say one thing about that is, has it been noticeable that he's been, underperforming 100%? But I'm not going to sit out here, and this is the case for a lot of Bay Area fans. And I know this as a Golden State Warrior fan too, and I see it all the time on Twitter, where Bay Area fans always overreact and are like, oh, once somebody's not playing well, I guess that's not the answer anymore. Brock Purdy is a great NFL quarterback. He has had some games this year that he has looked very mediocre. I'll give you that. But he is a good player for that system, and I think that he is a good player in any other system. I don't like the idea of just calling anybody who's in the Niners system as a system quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo certainly had some good games, but he struggled many, many times over multiple seasons. Even in that system, he did not thrive. I think Brock Purdy has I think he has a lot of good tangibles out there of an NFL quarterback. But I think the thing is, if we're going to be a successful team, if the Niners are going to be a successful team going forward, health is always the most important factor. They need to have good depth, and they need to have coaches who are managing the personnel properly. And we have not had that this year. And that's been something that's been very frustrating out there, too. The defense has been very lackluster. We have not had a good defensive coordinator since DeMeco Ryans. That's been noticeable because we have multiple guys out there on defense that have underperformed, and our tackling has completely gone downhill. It's been a little bit of everything for the 49ers, and it's turned out to be a souffle of crap that is going to get them to an under 500 record and not make the playoffs.
I think the stat I saw from Mike Tirico, you just spoke how the defense has been piss poor. They only started 3 players from that Super Bowl team last year against the Chiefs against Buffalo. They have no one on defense. Dre Greenlaw hasn't played all year. Hufanga's been out all year. Javon Hargrave only played 3 games, and now he's done for the year. Fred Warner is playing with a dislocated ankle. So the only 3 guys that you're starting from that Super Bowl team are Ward, Jair Brown, and Charvarius Ward. It's Ward, Warner, and Brown. Everybody else is either a rookie or a guy that you sign for cheap.
And Nick Bosa's been hurt this year too.
Nick Bosa wasn't even playing.
Yeah.
Nick Bosa hasn't played the last 2 games, and they could have won that game against Seattle. Nick Bosa kept the Seahawks to under 3 yards of play. After he went out, it was 6 yards of play. So if Nick Bosa doesn't go down, we beat the Seahawks, and then they're done. And then we only have to worry maybe about the Cardinals. I mean, they're only 2 back of the Seahawks right now, who are, I mean, they're fine. They're inconsistently on offense, but the defense has been much better. The defense has been much better since Byron Murphy and Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen have come back. They look like that Mike McDonald defense in Baltimore, or at least they're starting to. I mean, Big Leonard Williams had an pick 6 touchdown against his former team, the New York Jets. Nice moment for him. But now the Niners just bury this year.
You made a great point though. And this is something I wanted to bring up. If I'm Washington, I am racing. I am sprinting to the finish line to try to get 5 or 6, because whoever's 5 or 6 is going to likely wipe the floor with the NFC West and the NFC South, because the Arizona Cardinals, who look like they were going to be a team that might be one to be reckoned with, they've been mediocre the last 4 or 5 weeks. Seattle, while they're playing better, they're not a team that I'm confident to win a playoff game. So I think whatever 2 teams out of Green Bay, Minnesota, and Washington that you put in the 5 and 6, they could stomp a mud hole in the Seahawks, the Cardinals, or the Buccaneers, or the Falcons. I mean, those guys are going to be division winners in name only. and outside, and it's not going to matter. The NFC North is going to reign supreme when it comes to the divisional round this year, the way things are going.
No doubt. And then on the Niners side, then we'll talk more about the Niners in a second, but I want to give Josh Allen a ton of love because this Bills team has been very underrated in terms of its ability to contend for a Super Bowl. But the way Allen has been playing, at least over this hot stretch, they beat Kansas City. The defense has come together. Greg Rousseau, 6.5 sacks this year. They caught 3 fumbles against the Niners who couldn't stand their footing in that snow game. Allen is playing lights out. The run game has been fantastic with James Cook, Ray Davis, and Ty Johnson. Right now, is this the time that Bills Mafia could be celebrating a Super Bowl appearance?
That's my pick right now. Right now, the two top teams in the league right now look like Buffalo and Detroit, and that would be. I think a lot of neutral NFL fans would probably agree. That's an incredible matchup right there. That's a matchup that people would want to see. It's different. It's two teams that have felt like that they've been in the mix the last couple of years and just haven't quite been able to overcome, that hurdle ahead of them, whether it's San Francisco or whether it's Kansas City, and it's nice to see. Look, the Bills. Obviously, Josh Allen's done an incredible job. James Cook has done an incredible job running the football. Khalil Shakir has really shown up as a solid wideout the last few weeks out there. And then they have a really solid tight end, Dawson Knox, too. You mentioned their defense. Even Damar Hamlin is looking really solid out there in the secondary. They've got some good veterans that are helping lead some of the younger guys out there, guys like Von Miller too. I'm very intrigued to see if we get Buffalo Detroit, how that game would go. And right now, those look like the two favorites right now.
I agree. I think Buffalo still has to overcome the demon that is Patrick Mahomes because
Yes,
he produces a lot of moments that Bills fans would rather forget again in the playoffs.
It almost makes me think Patrick Mahomes, because you made a good comparison earlier, how you said that he's kind of like the Tom Brady of this era, and he is. In a way, Josh Allen is almost like the Peyton Manning of this era, and that you had Peyton Manning that was able to overcome the hump of getting past Brady a couple of times, but Brady got him more times than not, and multiple times Peyton would go out beforehand to Ben Roethlisberger or somebody else. In many ways, that's kind of like Joe Burrow is almost like the Roethlisberger in a way, and I know Cincinnati fans aren't going to like that comparison, but at the same time, it does kind of feel like those three quarterbacks are kind of that cycle in the AFC, and it feels like this is one of those years where Peyton Manning might beat out Tom Brady.
I hope you're right because I want to see Josh Allen win the MVP that he rightfully deserves. His play has been outstanding. And as someone who took him as his fantasy quarterback, I could not be any more ecstatic. And then, beating the Chiefs, going to the Super Bowl. Bills Mafia, we talk about Detroit going insane if they won a Super Bowl. Bills Mafia might destroy the town if they win a Super Bowl.
Oh, over under 124.5 broken tables.
Probably more. Probably more than 200 broken windows with
Yeah.
how crazy Bills Mafia is.
If the snow didn't already bury them in, then that would do it.
Probably, yeah. But no, it's been a great season for the Bills. They're 10-2, and then for the 49ers, just reshape, regroup. They've had a phenomenal draft class. Garendo has been fantastic. Mustafa has really emerged into a really good starting safety. Basically, now they've made Talanoa Hufanga expendable because Hufanga's been a Pro Bowler, but he's also been injured for the entire year. And then you got a guy like Renardo Green who's making, Travarius Ward expendable. Unfortunate incident with him. Condolences to the entire Ward family over the loss of his 1-year-old. That is a horrific tragedy. And then Trent Williams, all-pro left tackle, hasn't played the last, I believe it's 2 games. He's dealing with an ankle issue, but now he's losing his twins. Thoughts and condolences to the entire Williams family. But no, this has been really a season from hell. Robert Saleh, please come back in the offseason. We really need you to come back. Please, God, come back.
Yeah.
We really need a competent I think Nick Sorensen has been fine with the pieces he's had. The problem is when you're missing 5 Pro Bowlers on defense, you're not going to win. If you're starting Evan Anderson, Sam Okoronkwo, I mean, Green, who's been good, but he can't make up for it that much. A wash Leonard Floyd, Malik Collins has been okay. Lenore was out of that game too, and he's been really good this year. Congrats to him on inking a 5-year extension. But no, I think 4 out of the last 5 NFC Championship games finally just caught up to him. So just get healthy, come back next year, and then we'll go see if we can win one more Super Bowl before the roster gets blown up. But
Let me ask you one more thing before we move on from the Niners. Do do you keep Kyle Shanahan?
I, it's hard to argue. I mean, you posed this question before, and I asked. I mean, you asked me the same thing. I mean, if you let Kyle Shanahan go, who do you pick up instead? Like, it's hard to argue with the resume he's given you. Like, this is a horrible year. They've all been like, if it comes down to the players on the field not producing, then that's perfectly fine and reasonable. But I mean, fire Kyle Shanahan. But I think this has more to do with the amount of injuries they've suffered. I mean, if you're basically getting decimated on your entire defense is basically decimated without Pro Bowlers, you don't have you don't have your All Pro, Madden cover running back, which I have a feeling that Madden curse might be real with McCaffrey again. Boo. But yeah, and then Ayuk is out for a while. Jennings missed time. Purdy's been out. Kittle's been out. Trent Williams hasn't played the last 2 games. Nick Bosa. Like, if you're not gonna have your best players, you're not gonna win. So I say
Yeah.
give him one more year. If they do
Yeah,
not
I think in many ways you can compare the situation because both teams actually have the same record right now. Um, if you're going to, if the Cowboys are going to keep Mike McCarthy, which signals have looked like that because of the way Dax defended him recently, with how mediocre that organization and that franchise has been, then like, I mean, I know it's different franchises, but like you have to keep Kyle Shanahan in that case. Kyle Shanahan has at least led you to multiple Super Bowl appearances. He has won multiple playoff games for you. He has brought you to the promised land, even though you haven't overcome the promised land. I agree. I think that he has a good enough resume where you have to at least give him one more year. I think the big key thing is going to be how do we manage finances? What do we do when it comes to free agency? Do we re-sign guys like Debo if we're going to have to give a big contract to Brock Purdy, which in some ways his lack of play this year is actually maybe a blessing for the future because now maybe you don't sign him to 60 a year, maybe you sign him to 50 a year. So I don't know. I think a lot of it's going to come down to how finances are managed and what we do in free agency. But I agree. If you run it back one more time, if you're able to get a lot of the pieces back and you're able to stay healthy, I think that they're more than capable of still doing it. But that again, a lot of things have to go their way. But I would agree. I would give them one more year.
and I mean you said Debo, like do they resign it? I believe he has one more year left on his contract. And if they
Right. I'm
trade
just
him
thinking
now,
the same as the Ayuk situation of like, do you want to re-sign him so we don't get to that issue like we would have had with Ayuk?
which is a big surprise when Yamadou Lenore inked his 5-year
Yeah.
extension. Well deserved for him. He's been one of the best young corners in the league. So getting him off the market was probably the biggest priority they had and a priority they well took care of. But Trey Greenlaw's up for a new contract. He hasn't played all year. Hufanga has been injured most of the year. He's up for a new contract. Travarius Ward, injuries and family issue. He's up for a new contract. George Kittle's up for a new contract in a year or two. I mean, you drafted guys like Pearsall and Cowing and Garendo and all these younger players to take the places of them so that you could cheap out and save money when these guys get too expensive. Now that Purdy is going to be making quarterback level money, but you have to figure out who you're going to be paying on defense. I mean, I've even seen 49er fans get on the bandwagon to trade Nick Bosa. I mean, if you want to trade an all-pro defensive end for what? A first round, like a second round pick, like that seems like a poor allocation of resources. But do they bring Draymond Greenlaw back on maybe like a 1-year prove it deal because he's probably not getting more than the minimum contract elsewhere? Probably same with Hufanga, same with Ward.
I
maybe a
know this is
2 year deal for Warren.
I know this is a hindsight is 2020. In this case, hindsight is 2021 because man, just imagine had the Niners not taken Trey Lance and got Micah Parsons with that pick instead, and then you'd have Bosa on one side and Parsons on the other. Oh my God, that would have
That
been
just sounds
unstoppable.
scary.
Yeah, but is
No,
what it is.
mean, there's rumors that Dre Greenlaw may leave and go sign with Miami because of the Mike McDaniel ties. But I mean, how much money A can the Dolphins offer him, and B, how much is does Dre Greenlaw? I mean, his resume is very, very good. I mean, he's been an All Pro. He's been one of the best linebackers in the league, but he's also been injured. He's been out the entire year. So how much are you paying Dre Greenlaw? How much are you paying Hufanga, Kittle, Debo? Is the IU contract already a bust, even though it's been 1 year? I mean, he likely doesn't play next year, most of next year. So it's a lot of issues to figure out for the 49ers for the future. I mean, do you even look at trading McCaffrey? Like, he's getting up there in age. His contract is relatively reasonable. You have guys behind him that are doing pretty well. This is
My,
probably the one guy you probably look to trade the most.
my biggest worry is what we're even going to be able to get for him because I think, if he's down for as long as he's going to be down with this injury again, I wonder he's probably never going to be the same player again. And that's a sad thing. Is like I think Christian McCaffrey might go down as one of the biggest what ifs of all time, despite the fact that he had multiple incredible years in the league. He's probably going to go down as a guy that man, what if he was never injured, he could have been, top 10 running back maybe all time. But because of the injuries that he's dealt with his entire career, and it's a shame. I've watched him ever since his time at Stanford, when they were playing the Pac-12. But yeah, it's been unfortunate for sure of a running back at his caliber. I mean, I still think that he can go out there and get you touchdowns, but I don't think he's ever going to be the same kind of explosive back that he once was. I think you're muted. My bad.
I think I'm sorry about that, but I think he could bounce back next year and be probably close to what he was, just getting a ton of rest and getting off the Achilles. I think he probably came back a little bit too soon. I think he probably should have just opted for surgery and sat out for a year with how poor the Niners have been playing. And, they need him at his best to have the system that they have. Purdy has come under scrutiny. Kyle's come under scrutiny. So we just hope that Lynch figures it out. I mean, he's been a good GM over the last few years. He knows how to draft talent. The rookie class has been fantastic. The rookie class has been, other than Cowing, who's dropped a few punts, they've been mostly good. Pearsaw's shown flashes. Garendo's been really solid with the carries he's had. Mustafa, Bernardo Green, these guys have all really emerged this season. So he knows how to draft. I feel like offensive line they need to address because Purdy's been under a ton of pressure all year, especially without Trent Williams. And then getting an edge rusher next to Nick Bosa, and then linebacker because they'll never let go of Fred Warner because he's too important to the Niners to lose. But Greenlaw's the one who's probably likely on the way out. But too many issues.
Quite frankly, Ricky Pearsall, he gets a pass for whatever, however good or bad he did. The fact that he's even alive after what happened to him, I mean, the fact that he's even out there playing is incredible in and of itself after what happened to him before the season started. So I'm just happy that he's still with us, and I'm happy that he's contributing out there. And I think we'll see what he can truly bring to the team next season. Once we get past all this stuff.
Yeah. All right. I think we've covered a lot. Thank you everybody for listening. And I mean, one more thing before we go. I mean, they're only 2 games back of the division lead. The Cardinals have been in up and down all year. So have the Seahawks. So there is an outside shot. I mean, they have a really tough schedule. I mean, they face the Rams and the Cardinals again. They face the Dolphins, the Bears, and then of course the New Year's game I will be in attendance for against the Detroit Lions. So it's a really tough schedule, but I think they can do it. Let's just hope for better days ahead. So thank you everybody for listening. Sorry again for the long delay of podcast episodes. I mean, I'm gonna try and make it more consistent. Aaron, again, thank you so much for your knowledge and expertise. Your Patreon blog once again has been fantastic. Football season's over, but I guess you'd be transitioning over to soccer and stuff like that.
I will say, for anybody who is out in the Lincoln area, um, 12 Bridges High School, which opened up across town, playing for a NorCal championship. Is on Saturday if they win, they're in the state championship. So still big things going on for at least another week or so. And if anybody has an open Saturday night, the south side of Lincoln has got a game for you.
Yeah, shout out Chris, shout out Coach Bean. I mean, the first section title in school's history. I mean, making Lincoln very, very proud. And that place is. I mean, I've heard their games because I live very close to the school. That place is gonna be going nuts.
Oh
Like
yeah,
those
it's gonna
those
be
kids
packed.
been working so hard. Those kids been working so hard over there. Congratulations to everybody on the 12 Bridges High. I mean, one of the assistant coaches of 12 Bridges High is actually my next door neighbor. So, I mean, I get to see him and, like, congratulations, Coach Freitas. Good luck in state, man. And, shout out to 12 Bridges. And thank you again for listening. We'll catch you guys next time.